Hi, I'm Jeff Nyquist, and this is another edition of Friends and Enemies. I'm in the US. My co host Alex Benesch is in Germany. And I'm going to talk about the new UFO documentary, The Age of Disclosure, which just came out yesterday on the 21st of November. Also about the Collins Elite, which is a group of Christians in the Pentagon and intelligence community that started investigating UFOs early on and came to the conclusion that this is demonological phenomenon. This goes back to the 19, this goes back to the beginning of the phenomenon, back to around 1950, and how in this new documentary the Collins elite is attacked in the documentary, The Age of Disclosure. The documentary seems to take the point of view that UAP, UFO phenomenon are extraterrestrial, even though this is strictly not what some of the testimony, they use the term non-human. A demon's a non-human. Uh, and they say the Collins elite, these are Christians who are saying, you don't get involved with this. This is bad. You don't research it. And of course, there's a lot of prestigious people in this documentary, whistleblowers and people who are saying, look, we have recovered bodies, we have recovered vehicles. Of course, if it is demonological phenomenon, it goes back to the arguments that Thomas Aquinas had about whether demons have bodies. And of course, many ancient authorities did believe they can manifest physically. This is an interesting argument to be rehashed now. Whatever these things are, some experts use the term interdimensional. If you look at Jacques Vallée work, his book Messengers of Deception, his work Dimensions, what he has learned is consistent with the Collins elite model. John A. Keel said demonology is not another crackpotology. He was a leading ufologist who a lot of his conclusions from a journalistic point of view aligned with those of Jacques Vallée. Ultimately, this documentary has a lot of credibility because you're interviewing United States senators, you're talking about senators and pilots, and you've got an admiral on there, you've got people that are on the inside saying, well, I can't tell you what it is, but we've got crash
Mm.
retrieval and stuff. So and there's a political thing. I just want to mention at the beginning, Congressman Burchett, he led the committee that had the David Grush information that kind of blew this out into Congress. What he said is he called the Pentagon war pigs, the war pigs
Yeah, great.
hoarding their secrets. And this is not, there's an ideological angle to this, right left angle that I don't like. And of course, the UAP
Mm.
Disclosure Act is the big thing because if there's some kind of technology, whether it's parapsychological or physical technology associated with these things, and both countries are trying to develop it, trying to expose this, could compromise us. You know,
Well, most people, I mean, even so-called professionals in different fields, politics, security, even a lot of experts have failed at certain things, things that we talk about. Now, when we talk about the universe and the fabric of the universe and what reality is made of, and what some of the rules are, things getting into quantum physics, and we still can't quite finish the super theory of everything, where everything aligns, the super large things and the super small things, because we've established a bunch of different sets of rules that seem to apply. But according to our human logic, it all has to align. If it does not seem to align, we haven't found the alignment, or somebody made a mistake somewhere. Because humans, we don't like paradoxical things. I used to be very strict about paradoxical or seemingly paradoxical things. Either you made a mistake, or somebody else made a mistake, or you just haven't found the answer yet. So you got to work harder to find the answer and see if this is really something is it something that's illogical? Is it something that is contradictory? Now, some people, they still don't even understand the superpowers and what their long-term planning is, strategy is. There's things that get into people's way, such as wishful thinking or being so engulfed in a particular way of thinking that they can't go beyond that. Now, when we talk about multiple dimensions, which have been calculated, I think the number goes up to 11. According to our capabilities, our math, there's possibly up to 11 dimensions. Beyond that, the math isn't mathing anymore and the whole mathematical construct falls apart, but that may not even be the end of it still. So, people fail at certain things, others fail at harder things. Some people fail at, even though they try really hard, they fail still at some very hard things. And then there's things out there that are so difficult and so challenging that we as a species are very, very limited in comparison. And we're just developing tools to enhance us, meaning AI, meaning supercomputers or even quantum computers, and this, that, and the other. So even the best scientist in the world has limitations. Now a single scientist with the help of AI can do more things than just a scientist or a group of scientists. Okay, so we're getting somewhere. And the fabric of the universe, if people get into something like that and they get a first glimpse at how mysterious the universe still is to us, it's mind-boggling. It's mind-blowing. It's not just a three-dimensional space. It's not just like a big bowl, like a big fish bowl, where we all live in, and we can just go with a rocket or a spaceship from point A to point B. Well, first of all, we don't know where the universe truly ends, what's beyond it. How do we travel these distances? Do we even have to travel distances in a traditional way? Are there other ways? And also the issue of time and factors like gravity. And everything seems to be spinning on their own axis, spinning, the whole galaxy spinning, then this thing is spinning, and there's other things are spinning. There's forces in the universe that pull us in certain directions. So it's such a challenging field. I think everybody should take it very seriously. And people for ages, if they were allowed to do so, like in more elite circles or mystery cults, that were allowed and sanctioned. Some people were actually allowed to go to these places in their mind and try to figure things out. And people experimented with hallucinogenic drugs. And that actually inspired some people to believe, okay, there's more than meets the eye. It's hard to get something specific, lasting, solid out of a drug experience or a religious context drug experience, but it just opens up new ways of thinking, maybe, right? You're just thinking, okay, maybe three-dimensional space and regular time isn't everything. Now, the Pentagon has some very, very smart people working there. And others that may or may not come into contact with these issues or ramifications of these issues or traces of these issues. They're all different. And people in the West, usually, most people in the West, they don't even achieve a certain understanding about security. They don't even fully understand security and the superpowers. They make elemental mistakes. Even when we just take anything alien out of the equation, anything demonic out of the equation, anything what's really super special out of the equation. So people already fail and have been failing to understand these these life or death things, and then we may be confronted with something on top of it that's, multiple, times more complex and relevant, like different orders of magnitude. So that's kind of how I strongly respect the issue. Besides, of course, when people obviously are very bad at political science and are very bad at understanding the superpowers, and they say, well, I have come into contact with aspects of the alien topic, and by the way, the US or the Pentagon is just war pigs, and maybe the Russians are better, or we should force total transparency out of the US government, which could have bad ramifications. So I do not respect anybody who talks about this or turns it into a silly internet cult or has a bad understanding of security. But I definitely respect the issue itself, and I think that respect has grown over the last years a lot.
Yes. Well, this Collins elite is very interesting to me. Um, uh, they got interested because of Jack Parsons. Do you know this name, Jack Parsons?
Okay, it rings a bell, but I'm not
Jack
really.
Parsons was a rocket scientist who was friends with L. Ron Hubbard and was a
Oh yeah,
student
yeah,
of
yeah.
Aleister Crowley, right?
Mm-hmm.
The famous black magician who had done work with MI5 during World War II. And in 1945, they tried to do this conjuring of this little man, homunculus, in the desert in New Mexico, where we had our rocket test ranges when we were trying to start our own rocket programs. And they supposedly opened a gateway to summon this homunculus, this little man, who some say, with his giant head, resembles a one of these UFO aliens. Um, so the
Do you know the television show Stranger Things, which is like a huge
uh,
pop culture
I,
phenomenon?
I've heard of it. I have not
It's
seen
not.
it.
Yeah, it's now the final. Just a quick note. It's now the final season. It's one of the, I think, probably one of the biggest television events of the year. Final season of Stranger Things. The story started with this secret lab or secrets within the Hawkins laboratory, like in this tiny little town, Hawkins, Indiana, middle of nowhere, seemingly regular town. But there is this Hawkins laboratory. Officially, it's run by the Department of Energy for some benign purposes, but inside, they try to open portals to other dimensions. And then they also have this remote viewing program where they create children with remote viewing capabilities and other psychic abilities. And for one reason or another, a gate is opened. And then there's these demonic creatures that then come through the gate into our normal world. And they come from a place that's called the Upside Down, or is referred to as the Upside Down. It's like a parallel dimension to our dimension. It kind of looks like our world, but it's just a very grim, dark, scary version of our world. And there's other creatures in there. And as the story progresses, there's more portals, more demonic creatures. And Netflix made it a big deal. It became one of the biggest television shows. And it does get people's attention. What if?
Mhm.
Obviously.
Well, the Jack Parsons got the attention of the FBI and Air Force intelligence. They were aware of his actions with Crowley. Crowley, they understood who he was, um, and of course, they knew about this antics in the desert using black magic. So the Collins Elite was formed initially came from people who had interviewed Parsons, who had investigated Parsons' background and what he was doing. And of course, the Collins Elite is in this new documentary is attacked by Lou Elizondo, who refers to them as trying to block research into this area. There seems to be a kind of ideological, philosophic, theological antagonism because, and he basically says, because of their theology, they're opposed to researching this area. But it appears that they have actually been researching this all along. And of course, uh, the point of view of the Collins elite is they were always looking for evidence that the whole UFO flap of 1947 was triggered by the 1945 plus antics of Jack Parsons, who, in some of his writings, referred to himself as the Antichrist
Mm-hmm.
and was attempting. One of his girlfriends was the Whore of Babylon, if I remember correctly, and it's in Nick Redfern's book, on the Collins Elite, and and the book is called "Final Events and the Secret Government Group on Demonic UFOs." That's the title of Redfern's book, and of course, this is the group I said again that Lou Elizondo has complained about, and some of these other folks in the ATIP, the current or more recent Pentagon UFO investigatory body. Um, so some of those tasked with secretly investigating this man this man Parsons, and his actions in the late 1940s and 50s became caught up in the web of fascination that led them to dig ever deeper into his world, his beliefs, and his dealings with Aleister Crowley and L. Ron Hubbard, and even his possible role in generating the flying saucer wave of the 1940s. That's a quote from Redfern's book. Uh, What's interesting is the one witness, the oldest, the he got to interview one of the original members of the Collins elite who had been involved in the earliest investigations, and apparently Parsons. This is really bizarre. Kenneth Arnold, who made the first famous UFO sighting in 1947, just a little more than a week before Roswell incident in New Mexico, who coined the term flying saucers or flying discs. They looked like flying saucers. He was flying his private plane over Washington State when he saw them skipping over the mountains. These discs. Apparently, Kenneth Arnold knew Jack Parsons. Now that's a very bizarre thing.
Yeah.
Uh, and
Well,
in
the
fact, Parsons had connections to the Roswell base because he'd worked in the New Mexico area. This is also bizarre. And then under interrogation, Parsons admitted that he might have been responsible for the UFO flap in 1947, which is also bizarre.
Yeah, whenever we talk about space exploration and the whole area of quantum physics and other types of space physics, we talk about that and we talk about NASA. It's very Masonic. I mean, you gotta admit that, even though traditional conspiracy mythology is terrible and amateurish and blah blah blah. At least we can say NASA is very very Masonic, and that of course is I think
Can
an
you explain
important.
that? Why is NASA Masonic? Can you explain that?
Well, I mean, obviously, a lot of a lot of areas in government are Masonic, or there's Freemasonry networks, or different kinds of Freemasonry, because there's not just one system, obviously. And Masonry is many things, and it's also like it's almost like the only religious thing that would be attractive to a high-end scientist, somebody who maybe not attracted by conventional religion, somebody who is not influenced by it or hasn't grown up with it, somebody who wants to be pure scientific, have pure exploration. and on, but still Masonry, Freemasonry can be eternally fascinating to those people. And we've seen figures, standout scientists like Nikola Tesla being very interested in dimensions and possible demons, or what he called ghosts. I think maybe it was him or some other figure who was a member of the Ghost Society or the Ghost Club. Recently in London, I was in that, what was that one cathedral with all the famous people being buried. And sometimes you're supposed to walk over these big granite or slabs of stone. And this is where below those are the physical remains of famous people in the British realm, especially a lot of scientists, remains of the scientists. And there's very much a glorification of Sir Isaac Newton in hindsight. And I think even texts have come out that suggest Sir Isaac Newton was very, very interested in dimensions and demons and entities, or I just refer to that as entities, very careful term. And it goes on and on and on. Top scientists coming to that point where they are seriously considering entities. And of course, even somebody like Carl Sagan, who spoke to the public and was terrible when it came to security and was terrible when it came to politics and superpowers, somebody like Carl Sagan popularized some concepts about, let's say, a fourth dimension. And they talk about, you still see this on the internet or people recreating these presentations. They show you a four-dimensional hypercube, or a graphical representation of what a four-dimensional moving box would look like, maybe. And then they give you this example. If you have a two-dimensional plane like this table, right? And there's two-dimensional creatures living on that table. They can only move on that plane, only two dimensions. They can go this direction or that direction or this, that. Straight, back, left, and right. That's all they know. They're just their understanding is two-dimensional space. But then me, as a human, watching this table, watching this two-dimensional space, I'm more advanced. I live in a three-dimensional, or I understand a three-dimensional space. I can not just move front, back, left, right. I can also move or look up and down and move within that three-dimensional space.
And you don't even have to have any contact with this one-dimensional paper-thin realm.
And so these
hand on the page, right?
Exactly. So these hypothetical two-dimensional creatures on their two-dimensional plane, could they even recognize me if I'm above them? Could they understand? Look at me, sense that I'm here, prove that I'm here, prove that I exist? Probably not, because they're so limited. Now then, they explain, like Carl Sagan and others, they explain, what about a fourth dimension or a fifth dimension or whatever, and there might be entities or something that are, that are more advanced than I am. I'm just in a three-dimensional space. I have three-dimensional thinking. Could I recognize these other entities? Could I maybe sense, guess a hint of a trace of these entities in these other dimensions? Maybe. And I think this is where Freemasonry comes in, and this is why Freemasonry has been so successful, and why I think many scientists, leading scientists, are Freemasons or were Freemasons. I mean, go around in London, check out the Royal Society, for the longest time, leading scientific organization in the world, full of Freemasons, and it was created as a sister organization to British Masonry. It was Freemasonry and the Royal Society, and before that, it used to be a total blend. I mean, the older royal society in the 1600s with the older kings, those guys were, you had scientists, you had science there, but it was openly Rosicrucian. They were very esoteric, and they had a lot of, mumbo jumbo. And then
Yeah,
they
well,
kind of,
this is just one step away from Jack Parsons and being a scientist who's involved outright in the occult, and he's not the only one.
yeah.
Um, and sex magic and the rest of that. Parsons' home was described. He lived in Pasadena. Was described by neighbors as, quote, a gathering place of perverts. The FBI agents and Air Force intelligence personnel were scandalized that women of loose morals would come to the house of Mr.
Hmm.
Parsons.
Hmm.
This is part of the practice. The Air Material Command contacted Parsons after the Kenneth Arnold sighting, uh, partly because they understood that he knew Kenneth Arnold. They wanted to understand: is this some kind of a game between you and Kenneth Arnold? And it's very bizarre. And the fact that Raymond Palmer, who ultimately, I think he produced UFO magazine. He produced magazines involved in fantasy, I think, in fiction before that. Helped, I think he helped Kenneth Arnold write his book. But it's uh, these interconnections and the Air Force and the intelligence people's interest. There's also was the theory that Parsons was spying for Israel at one point. He was spying for the Israelis, and that he stole some documents which got him kicked out of his rocket program. So he ended up losing his security clearances
Hmm.
and so on. This guy was a very unsavory character, you might say. Parsons was.
I mean, it
Um,
it does introduce kind of a whole new element when it comes to espionage, right? Because normally when you ask an intelligence professional, what are the reasons somebody would be convinced to work for you and become your source or your asset, or how can you recruit someone, or how can somebody recruit one of your people and he becomes a traitor? And they always give you the standard answer. It's like the money and ideology and status and personal
Yeah,
liking and ideology.
there's a really
But
creepy detail. You know, the
but
Jehovah's Witnesses, who started out as this Bible movement, they had some visionary who claimed that the Antichrist would be born on October 2nd, 1914, and that is Parsons' birthday,
hmm.
which is
Yeah, and it's like when
weird.
you introduce these potential dimensions and entities, that can have a total new or different effect when it comes to espionage and motivations to become somebody's source, or to get somebody to become your source, because that's a whole different type of motivation. And with scientists, military people, I mean, military people often are also Masons. Different professions have Freemasons in them. Not every Mason is the same. Totally not. But it's always the question of how do you maybe get a glimpse of a trace, maybe, of these dimensions and entities? How do you get there? Some people say, well, just take psychedelics. And that can or may not be
What people are
inspiring to
talking
people.
about, yeah,
It
they're
can be
talking about
inspiring
that
to
a lot.
people. It can lead people also into in a bad direction. It can solidify ideas that have been fed to you. We know that now from many studies. It doesn't matter if the left did this, the left tried this. Now the new right-wing, alt-right, tech bro sphere is trying to push psychedelics. I mean, they want to legalize it, and then everybody can get a medical card and get his psychedelics, and then maybe it's totally illegal. But that's not the only way. Others, they try to copy, recreate standard rituals, public rituals that anybody can look up and recreate. Repetition. You repeat somebody else's ritual. That's also what Masons are doing. Obviously, there's like different Masonic systems, and they have Masonic rituals, and you're supposed to recreate these rituals word perfect. There's also magical thinking about this, or a special
Well, it's a
type of
ritual
thinking.
magic that Aleister Crowley was involved with, and one of the disturbing things is that Crowley, in his correspondence, there's correspondence where Crowley refers to L. Ron Hubbard and Parsons as those idiots. They probably didn't close the portal, which
Great.
meant that it's open and these things are going to come flooding in, and you're going to get more of this. It's as if you've opened up a thing on the pit of hell. The Collins elite, as far as I can tell, and what Lou Elizondo says is they're Christians. He calls them fundamentalists, but I don't know if there's any contact with the Collins elite. Was funded by the Pentagon to investigate the demon theory of UFOs, which is interesting
Yeah.
because an official investigation began so early with the phenomenon that it was demonological. And this was kept secret because of obviously the controversy, and they wanted to operate secretly for their own effective investigations so nobody would interfere with it. But the Pentagon financed them. And so when Parsons died by blowing himself up, he was trying to become a kind of an arms um, to create explosives. He was experimenting with new kinds of explosives, and he blew himself up in Pasadena. Died in the ER after he was taken there. But they apparently, according to Redfern, they got upset in the Pentagon, thinking now he's dead, because I think they had some kind of thought that maybe he could close this portal somehow for them. They were worried about what this meant, so they redoubled their efforts to investigate this, and they found more and more things as they went on. The first UFO contactees were famously George Van Tassel, George Adamski, and George Hunt Williamson. And all three of them were involved in the occult, and all of them described their visitations with blonde, human like aliens who
Mm.
I think they all three of them agreed they came from um, Venus, but George Hunt Williamson especially and Van Tassel were involved in, I guess you could say, channeling aliens from all the different planets. I mean, I think George Hunt Williamson got messages from, Mercury, not just Venus, and maybe Uranus or Saturn or something. They were coming in from all over. And of course, this is the same thing. This channeling is what spirit mediums do, right? They channel entities.
Yes, because
So the original contactees were involved in the occult and they were involved in channeling, but they also were they all presented the aliens, quote unquote, as communists, living in an ideal communist society.
mm,
This
mm.
alarmed the Collins elite because it's like, are these people Soviet agents? Is it
Yeah,
the
and
Soviet
you see the reverberations of that in, I think, an overwhelming share of science fiction. I mean, Star Trek and people who are inspired by this science fiction, and they try to, take something from that and try to apply that in real life and say, oh, wouldn't it be awesome if, these smart bureaucrats, scientists, bureaucrats, if they decide everything and there's no money and you don't have to work a stupid job to pay for the basic
Star
blah blah
Trek?
blah.
Yeah.
Star Trek, yeah, and others,
They
and
live in a communist society, and look,
yeah, I mean, there's
the
some
next
obviously,
generation of Star
yeah,
Trek is like a bunch of they're a bunch of politically correct woke bureaucrats in
yeah,
space
yeah,
flying
and it's
around
like,
in
and
space.
even when science fiction deviates from that template, then they do kind of a thing that's also communist, like we saw with especially James Cameron's movies, especially Avatar, but not just Avatar. It's like a future society, humanity in the future hasn't changed. Still like this Marxist idea of cannibalist capitalism and decay imperialism, and then there's these good aliens, but the evil capitalist humans, they try to exploit the resources of the aliens to get a material that they call unobtainium, right? So it's communist this way, sci-fi, or it's communist the other way. But it's like, how do you? And even in Avatar, it's this getting outside of your body. That's kind of the core of the movie. This human soldier whose consciousness is then transferred to an artificial alien body. So he wakes up and he's inside of that alien body, and he can interact with these aliens. And there's like this Gaia-like all connecting world spirit on this foreign planet. So they got the whole thing in there. But the question is, for humans, how do you maybe get a glimpse of a trace of some sort of contact with these other dimensions and entities? And some say, well, you have to do something extremely evil to innocent people. You have to get into these extreme things, and that opens your possibilities. That's kind of your standard baseline idea of evil magic, or what Alexander Dugin calls the left-hand path. I hope I'm not getting this wrong here. A specific path of magic. It's supposed to be evil. You're doing something evil, or sex magic. You try to push the envelope, push it to the limits, and that maybe get you a glimpse of a trace of a hint of these other entities and worlds. Now, for a Freemason, or a high-ranking serious Freemason, you don't just repeat these old rituals word for word perfect in the lodge. You're supposed to apply this outside of the lodge and uncover secrets and do something in the scientific world, or in the military world, or in the business world. Make something big happen. At least that's more, I think, more constructive. Maybe sometimes, hopefully, it's more constructive to try to get some sort of contact that way, by being super productive. You know, it's one thing to be super productive in the hopes of getting contact, instead of picking random victims and doing some evil stuff in the desert or in your basement with other innocent people in the hopes of making contact. I think it's pushing all kinds of different people to their limits. And I think it's inevitable that we're pushed to specific limits of what we can do, because when we're pushed to the limits, eventually those limitations will expand. So the realm of what we can do and what we can understand, the realm gets bigger, but also not just the opportunities get bigger, but also the risk gets bigger. Because we've talked about this in a different context. Let's say what you explain about Hitler copying, what was it, Ibsen, and he had this whole occult concept, and right. Having all these victims, especially victims that are not soldiers, that may have played a significant occult. Maybe that was an important occult reason for the Nazis. Again, just like
the Nazi link, not only is there this worry that the Collins elite had that there's a communist link to the UFO movement, there's a Nazi link, because George Adamski had been involved with Peli of the Silver Shirts. He was an American Nazi who was put in prison for 8 years. And Adamski wrote a book with a British aristocrat who was Churchill's cousin. You may know this guy's name, Desmond Leslie, who was a British nationalist, who was, and these nationalists are like, National Socialist kind of associated with Nazism. And of course, what's interesting is that the Nazi diaspora, and I've emphasized this again and again, after 1945, the Nazi diaspora was heavily penetrated by Soviet agents. So the communists could use Nazis to carry out their operations. So that would be like a plausible deniability. We're not doing this. The Nazis are doing this. So the FBI and Air Force intelligence sees these Nazi connections, but in the end, they couldn't find a direct communist connection. And I think in their investigation, they might have missed the fact.
Yeah, and some Nazis that were, or former Nazis that were recruited for American research, like the space program, and
Werner von Braun.
Yeah, and I think his mentor, if I'm not mistaken, his mentor was Mr. Obert, and he's from basically just around the corner where I live. There's a museum. There's a museum here in his name. There's roads, streets that are named after him. So he's from just around here, and Mr. Obert, had these ideas of space battle stations, a battle station in space orbiting the planet, being able to shoot missiles, preferably be able to shoot missiles downwards towards Earth. I think some of his ideas were then hacked up and used for the movie, the Stanley Kubrick movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is one of the darkest movies ever made, and one of the most bizarre movies ever made.
I didn't understand it when I watched it.
Well, I mean, it's like it's supposed to be. I think it's people have looked at this for decades now, and the latest what people are saying is that the black screen, in when you watch it, preferably projected in a cinema or your home theater, sometimes when the screen is fully black, the screen, because of the aspect ratio, the black screen is almost like the same aspect ratio as the black monolith that comes up several times in the movie. And every time this monolith is discovered, big changes, fundamental changes happen. So you see these monkey-like creatures in the beginning. They discover this black slab, which looks exactly like those black slabs of stone that I walked on in this cathedral in London with all these scientists buried underneath it. Yeah, and so there's this object, this monolith, and it's kind of in this orientation. But then if you tilt it, or if you turn it, then it's like your black cinema screen. And so the black screen becomes the black monolith for the audience. And then we see, after this intro with no dialogue, there's like 20 minutes or maybe more in the first part of the movie with no dialogue. You're supposed to know certain things already. You're supposed to be a reader, like Stanley Kubrick was a voracious reader. The more you have read, the more you understand what this imagery means. Then this monkey-like creature has this epiphany, starts using weaponry, and then there's a jump cut to the modern time, the future, and you see a space station. You see this revolving space station that's basically, I think, Mr. Obert's space station idea. And you're introduced to glimpses of like a space race between the Soviets and the Americans. They don't say it outright. They don't give you the usual exposition of the plot in the background. But if you know things, you should be able to understand
what's love in space.
Yeah. What's going on? There's like you see some weird Russian in this one space station, and he tries to figure out what's going on. And then there's this conference room, and it's these Americans, and I think they talk about this monolith, another monolith that has been found on the dark side of the moon, if I remember this correctly. And then they have a manned mission. You see, they go to this. They are on the moon, I think, and then they find this monolith, and then you hear this piercing, disgusting sound, and everybody's in pain, apparently. And then the next thing is a deep space mission, like the next step in search of whatever. And so this little crew in another spaceship, they are on this crazy mission to go to the next step. And they have an artificial intelligence on board that has its own mind. In the end of the movie, where the remaining character has this tripped out LSD-like travel, it's very similar to the ending or the final moments, the climax of the movie Interstellar, which is a much newer movie. and the Nolan movie. There's also certain communist aspects to this movie, and the director Christopher Nolan made another basically pro-communist movement about the atomic spies. That was the hailed Oppenheimer movie, which is terrible, based on a terrible book. It's like in Interstellar, there's the main character Cooper who's saving the world. It's a happy ending, unlike 2001, it's a clear ending in Interstellar. There's also this crazy travel, very close to a black hole, and they get this super data out of this crazy trip, and then somehow Cooper ends up in a multi-dimensional cube-like structure, a tesseract. He's able to communicate with his own daughter in the past, who's still a version of his daughter in a past time. He's able to transmit information to her, while she, at that young age, believed she was in contact with what she calls ghost from another dimension. So, again, how do you make contact? Some people want to be extremely productive to get some sort of contact. Other people want to be extremely destructive, very destructive, to have the power of the gods or a god, to be wasteful. I made that point with the Nazis. The Nazis were extremely wasteful when it came to resources and human life, because it's like the power of the gods, as some people understand it, especially occultists. If you try to be like them, you be like the entities. You're not bound by regular moral restrictions, and you can destroy just because you want to.
Anyway, Desmond Leslie, who wrote this book with George Adamski, and I think the book was the Flying Saucers Have Landed, I think was the title of the book. But his father was, and you'll like this, was Lord Tredegar, an eccentric dabbler into the black arts, and of course, he was a friend of Aleister Crowley,
Mm-hmm.
British Lord. So you come back to Crowley again with this UFO, and of course William Dudley Pelley's 1950 book Starguest, and of course Pelley was jailed for 8 years as a silver shirt in the 1940s, and so there's this American Nazi connection. So you have this initial attempt to use these UFO flaps as a kind of communist propaganda, also ban the bomb. The messages from the entities is always, you're destroying the universe, the fabric of the universe, your atomic weapons, your plans for destructive war are known to us. We won't interfere, but you have to stop this. And of course, what did the Russians were behind the ban the bomb movement in the 50s?
Yeah.
And then we had a movie that was really based on all this in the 1950s called The Day the Earth Stood Still, and they did a remake later.
Yeah.
Remember that movie?
Mm.
That was like the flying saucer lands on the White House lawn or something. Was it the Capitol? Was it in the mall in the Capitol of the White House lawn? And we surrounded, of course, with troops and tanks, and they shoot at the alien and wound him. He's a Venusian. I think he's from Venus. And if I remember, it's been decades since I saw the movie. And of course, he's here to bring a message that we can choose peace or we can blow ourselves up. And the day the Earth stood still, they make all of our electronic gadgets fail. So the power is out everywhere. Everything has failed. And this is their warning to us. And of course, I think they did an update to it with maybe some global warming wokeness in it more recently. I didn't see it. But this again, all of this seems more like psychological warfare.
Oh yeah, it reminds me of James Cameron's movie The Abyss. I mean, this was like I think maybe still in the late 80s or maybe around 1990. So James Cameron, Terminator and later Titanic and Avatar and the movie Aliens. He made this movie about deep sea exploration. It had like a Cold War plot. This was like there's a rescue mission, a sunk submarine with nukes in there, like East versus West, and of course these military guys in the story are
We're
the
always
bad guys.
stupid to oppose the
Yeah,
communists. We should just let them take
yeah,
over
yeah,
the world. Our arming
paranoid.
ourselves is wrong, right?
Exactly. So the army guys or the military guys are paranoid, closed minded, super harsh, and they make everything worse. And then mixed into this kind of worldly plot is an alien plot. And the movie kind of ends with or climaxes with the main character being in a sort of weird space where he can finally really have eye to eye sort of contact with these entities, with these aliens. And supposedly these aliens are benign. They want to help us and influence us. And I think he asks them some kind of question. Why, what do you want from us, or what do you have for us? And then they show him some footage of bad things happening in the world. So they want to help us to world peace. And of course, we have to give up capitalism. We have to give up military security. We have to have a specific way of thinking, and then we supposedly get what this wonderland that is promised to us. So it's dangerous. I mean, especially if some of the smartest people on Earth have been struggling with these topics or failing at certain topics or failing, especially when it comes to the security aspects. But then we also have the overwhelming public influenced by communism, influenced through Hollywood communism, being pre-programmed to think in a certain way. And those people are voters. Those people are political activists. They influence other people. So it's kind of like there could be a chain reaction of bad decisions, right? When information leaks out about entities and dimensions. So this is like something. I mean, I was always a big fan of transparency. I was a big fan of transparency and responsibility, even sometimes when it's harsh. And so it's like I was kind of ambiguous about government secrecy. As time went on, I understood more and more of the value of secrecy. Sometimes it's a very difficult place to make decisions, right? I mean, how much security or secrecy do you really need? And over time, as you grow older, you become more and more suspicious of people's behavior in general, regardless of their ideology. I mean, how they interact individually, how they act as a group member. It's tough. I mean, people make some awful decisions, and when there's something apparently big to gain, things can go crazy. Or when there's supposedly a big threat from another dimension, that can also make people really crazy. So it's like, yeah, everybody calls for transparency. We want to see the aliens. We want to know what the government knows. Really? Who needs to be handling this? Who needs to be who needs to be in charge of this? That's kind of a good question. We want Donald Trump to be in charge of this. Mr. Casino, Mr. I was hanging out with Epstein in the past. Mr. Money is was the most important thing to me. He's supposed to manage this. Or some other Republican that we know of. You're mute.
So, these people are so ignorant. The idea that there are non-human entities or entities superior to man, just read the Bible. There are angels, devils, gods, God. In all these ancient peoples' recordings, and you've got Van Daniken claiming they're spacemen. But if you go and you look at the oldest stuff is the Sumerian tablets. And there's a young guy, a young academic who's gotten involved, Matthew LaCroix. One of his books is The Stage of Time. Secrets of the Past, The Nature of Reality, and the Ancient Gods of History. And of course, he goes against Van Daniken quite a bit, and he goes against Zachariah Sitchin, who wrote The 12th Planet and other
Mm-hmm.
light fantasies. It was the claim of Zachariah Sitchin that he could translate Sumerian tablets, and that he knew the Anunnaki, which were the gods of ancient Sumeria, that they were spacemen. They were extraterrestrials who came and created mankind through some kind of genetic technology as a slave race, right? Well, of course, he's really doing a good service for us, this Mr. LaCroix, because he says, look, that's nonsense. Zachariah Sitchin did not know how to translate Sumerian tablets. That LaCroix was working with the people who were the best translators. I think George Smith was the genius who, I think in the 1870s, figured out how to read ancient Sumerian cuneiform tablets, and where we got the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest things written. I think it's maybe 5,000 year old, 5,000 year old book, if I remember right. These are the oldest writings that we have as human beings. It talks about the flood, the great flood. It talks about Anunnaki, and it talks about beings, but different kinds of beings and the beginnings of mankind. And so we have a flood story like the Noah's Ark story in there. And of course, the Anunnaki, what are they? LaCroix says they seem like human beings. Maybe they're interdimensional. Maybe there's some magic in here. There's religion. There's symbolism. It's very hard to figure out what is going on in these things because of their use of symbolism. Everybody wants to grab onto this materialist philosophy. It's interesting to me that Zachariah Sitchin was born in the Soviet Union in Soviet Azerbaijan. So
Oh, great.
it was almost Soviet. He was born around the time that it was becoming a Soviet country. I don't know exactly when when his family immigrated to Israel, but it's very interesting that his whole take on these ancient, the fabricating these ancient cuneiform tablets and making these very popular books that millions of people
Mm,
believe. It's a very Soviet message because it's about humanity being a slave race, right? Well, what is Marxism about? The revolt
yeah.
of the slave race. This is another version of a Gnostic doctrine, right? Where we were created as slaves, so it's back to Prometheus, right? Which was Marx's favorite character from ancient Greek mythology. Back to Prometheus. I hate all the gods, Prometheus says,
Yeah.
and he's going to help give man fire and technology, so man can join him perhaps in not really following the gods anymore. And of course, that's what Marx is all about, and this is Eric Vergelin goes into this in his political science, that it's Marxism as well as Nazism are Gnostic beliefs, and where man is going to become God. And so the spacemen, that whole thing, you notice that all of these narratives, whether you go to James Cameron or you go to Stanley Kubrick, again, you're getting some Gnosticism in here.
Yeah, and I mean, even Kubrick. I mean, I highly respect the work of Stanley Kubrick. I think he was closer to actual breakthroughs than he was even aware himself, because in his movies, I mean, he did all kinds of genres, stories that take place in all kind of different times. He made Barry Lyndon about some average guy with low morals who schemes his way from place to place and ultimately becomes like an aristocrat. Science fiction movie, a contemporary movie, Eyes Wide Shut, about current elites, Western elites, engaging in ancient rituals in secluded, very expensive places. But there's like a common thread in all of these movies. I think he was fascinated with he wanted to understand, even from a scientific standpoint, he wanted really to understand and solve the problem of human evil, extreme evil. And I think he also wanted to really understand how evil, organized evil, is and was part of empires. And I think had he been more focused in some areas, maybe he would have understood more about more about the aristocracies. I mean, he's giving you all kinds of hints, and he was mapping things. He was closer to a breakthrough than he even knew. But that was his thing. But I think Kubrick was also influenced by standard leftist ideas,
definitely. Yeah.
and his. I mean,
Look
Dr.
at
Strangelove.
Strangelove.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Dr. Strangelove, I think, is the most clear example of that, where security people, military people, are all silly and destructive and crazy, and it's like everything is like a dark. They made it as a dark comedy. There was I think the idea of making it into a serious storyline. No jokes, nobody riding the rocket with the cowboy hat in his hand or whatever, and
The hydrogen bomb, writing the hydrogen bomb down.
and none of that funny business with the former Nazi guy who can't control his hand, who makes the Hitler salute, can't help himself, and none of those jokes. But they made it into a dark comedy. Maybe as a subversive way of getting the ideas across, because there's power in humor, and we see that in all kinds of places. Even the new right, alt-right, they trying to be so funny because they think there's maybe occult power in that humor, chaos magic, right? But Kubrick was interested in these topics. He tried his thing to understand it and present his ideas. I think he did fail in some very important aspects when it comes to that. But at least it wasn't so simple as Zechariah Sitchin and others. I mean, when some of these books came out, or Erich von Däniken, I think Erich von Däniken. I mean, he was also an influencer for later science fiction movies, such as I think Alien, the Alien versus Predator movie, when they discover this ancient pyramid-like structure, and then at the core there's like these hibernating aliens and predator creatures. Kind of
there's a formation of a new mythology around aliens and stuff.
And it's like when some of these books came out, Erich von Däniken and Sitchin, the space program was. It was much closer to the older space program, so it was still kind of new to people, the audience that was buying these books. And so some of these books, they say, well, the pyramids were like visual help for the aliens so they could land their planes, so they would know where they are. Do we really think that a species from other worlds or far away or other dimensions, that they would need a big stone rock structure as a visual aid? Like they wouldn't have sensors and other ways to know where they are and where they could land or they should land.
By the stars, right? Where they supposedly come from.
And fiery rockets. I mean, do we really think that other species haven't advanced beyond what we used decades ago? Fiery rockets, combustion rocket fuel, standard rocket fuel. They didn't have something more advanced, a more advanced way of travel. It's like talking to an uneducated population, speaking in simple images, and just saying that they are the gods, that there's a common thread among all religions, because supposedly all these old religions, major religions, they all supposedly talked about the same stuff, the same aliens. And this was like a big thing. This was like a big thing in science fiction for a long time, especially Prometheus, the movie from Sir Ridley Scott.
It's not an accident. This name Prometheus.
Yeah, and he did the original Alien movie, and it was released in 1979. When he was a young director and he hadn't done science fiction before, he made the Alien movie. Years down the line, he made the Prometheus movie, which I think takes place before the plot
It takes
of
place on some other
the
planet where
'79 movie. Yeah, it's
they
like the
found
same.
evidence
And you
that
got
these
the evil, yeah,
creators
and
of mankind tried to eliminate us by using a biological weapon that was
yeah,
the alien,
yeah.
what it is a weird kind of creature that eats people, right?
Well, it's
It
like
just
they
devours them.
find the Prometheus movie starts with these archaeologists, and they find ancient cave paintings, and they say different parts of the world, oldest cave paintings, they all have the same space map, the same constellation. So it's like those people, those humans were in contact with aliens, and so they have this map, and now we have the technology, so we fly to that place. And this evil capitalist, Wayland Yutani Corporation, they finance the mission, and the old guy is on board. He wants to meet the what they call the architects, masonic term, really. They want to meet the architects, and they find the remains of such a creature, an architect. Looks kind of human, kind of like similar genetic structure. And then the humans on that mission, far away in space, they don't know how to interpret that. The one woman who's the main character, she's a Christian, but the others are different, and so nobody is quite sure what to make of it. Should we be cheering? Is this great? Is this meaningless? Or is this bad? We finally found the creatures that probably created us, but they're not necessarily benign. We're in competition with them. So we need to kill those gods and make our own way before they kill us.
Yeah, but you see, they're trying to. This is part of this story. The Gnostics make the snake in the garden. Cain and Satan. They're all heroes.
Yeah.
It's those are the heroes, and of course the bad guy is Yahweh. The bad guy is the
Yeah, yeah,
creator
yeah.
God. And of course the flood is an attempt to wrongly stamp out humanity because humanity is so great. And of course, so you've taking ancient Greek myths, you're taking from the Bible, you're inverting the whole presentation. You're making the good guys into bad guys and the bad guys into good guys. You're inverting good and evil in these stories,
Yeah, and
basically.
of course the role, I mean, the kind of like the interpretation of the Bible and the interpretation of the devil and the evil, fallen angels and all that. So the interpretation, of course, has changed over the centuries in different empires. Especially in Europe, right, where the some aspects were upgraded, some aspects were downgraded. I mean, the witch hunt phase, when there was this phenomenon of finding supposed witches that were supposedly causing all that damage, and they had this whole system of finding people. But of course, they would get anybody into their net who was still interested in older or other types of religions. So they would say, okay, you're not a Christian or a specific type of Christian, so now you're a suspect. We have probable cause. We have judges and executioners and the police, the justice system. So we will take you out. And of course, those episodes have caused tremendous damage for the credibility of Christianity. And of course, communists use that to great effect. When the communist movement, especially when it was still young, when communists hadn't yet killed millions and tens of millions of people, this is when the communists tried to say, "Oh, look at the witch hunting, and look at all the bad things that happened in these European empires, with Christianity sort of attached to that." So this was, of course, a big opportunity for
And this
communism.
is where the Russians are using ecumenism, and they're using the
Yeah,
New Age
and then
movement
the communists actually copied the witch hunting structure, the template, the model. They said, okay, you're not a communist, or you're not communist enough, or the right type of communist.
Right.
Now we're gonna hunt you. We have judge, jury, and executioners, and we torture you. And it's the same thing. We stole that from the European old
And the
empires, the
Gulag is
Inquisition.
hell, and Stalin is God and the Gulag is hell, and
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Well, anyway, we run out of time, but I want to thank you, Alex, and I want to thank the audience for sticking with us. And we're going to have more next week. I'm Jeff Nyquist. This has been Friends and Enemies, and my co-host has been Alex Benesch. Thank you for being with us.